I'm reading here in Lettrétage, and this essay tonight is called Ghostwriter. I wrote it specifically for tonight's Hafla, and it's dedicated to Andrea, who inspired me to write it.
Andrea!
A woman exchanges emails with two men. The first man, a former lover with whom she stayed in touch for a few years, is a scholar living in Long Island. He used to be an excellent pen pal, but recently his academic career took a leap, and his interest in anything other than that took a hit. The second man, whom she met a few weeks ago only on Museum Island, is a writer. Despite confessing that he doesn't read books, he curiously holds strong opinions about them, which can be read every other week in the pages of a popular German newspaper. The first man mentions a visit to Berlin, initially enthusiastic, but later rudely stating, "Yeah, maybe I'll see you," but he stresses, with utmost academic self-importance, only after presenting my new findings on Freud before the academic world of scholars. With the second man, it begins promising, but things quickly sour as he starts cancelling dates and being increasingly occupied reviewing books he doesn't read, while sending her emails that become really self-focused. Constant mentions of his ex-girlfriends dominate the conversation, as he casually describes running into them around town like an unplanned pregnancy that keeps happening. He refers to his ex-loves like they're characters in a history book, never bothering with names. They're just they. And in a bizarre plot twist, he even calls one of his exes it, turning the diversity saga into a strange grammar lesson. The woman realizes that the two men share more than verbose discussions about their public and private affairs. They both engage in non-stop banter with a great sense of selfishness. So, after a few such emails, she starts to grow uneasy and angry, reaching a level of frustration that is usually attained only when one feels completely unseen, like being zipped in a plastic bag at the airport. Most of all, she grows tired, dead tired, a transgenerational tiredness that she attributes solely to the wear and tear of having to still deal with the uninterrupted undercurrent of the emotional self-centeredness of men who still have the holacracy to want their cake and eat it too, while she starves, because between the two of them, she can't keep being intellectual while being thin or pretty, not without sounding petty. Isn't this what we've been told anyway, even if we are also told that we should have it all? Unable to connect with the men, the woman finds herself slowly disappearing during the interactions, like a ghost. So, one day, seeing that she's talking to herself and that they're talking to themselves, out of boredom, she simply pastes a paragraph from the first guy's email to reply to the second one. She figures that the first man writing would snugly fit in her goodbye email to the other one, since it sounds so academic and abstract and in line with the massive self-involvement and lack of self-awareness of the second guy. Expecting never to hear back, she's very surprised when the second guy writes back quickly, blossoming with interest. Okay. The emails, Seeing that this worked, she continues. This time she answers the first man with excerpts from the second man. So the emails start to arrive more and more often. And they pop with excitement, thriving, flourishing like corn after a rainy day. The first man's stoic, philosophic language contrasts with the second guy's graphic novel about ghosting his exes, love triangles, and unsolved romantic issues. But it all becomes like a symbiosis where two animals take advantage of each other and both have something to gain. The woman realizes she has inadvertently created an unparalleled form of artificial intelligence. A curious confection of parsimony and progressiveness, a new ChatGPT that only seems to demonstrate that the less involved she is, the more involved these men are with her, meaning with each other in a seemingly selfless, yet massively narcissistic way of relating. They're not even pretending to listen because they hear exactly what they want to hear. It's like sending a salad into a pizza competition and winning. And what works even better is that even though both men know they are speaking to a person with needs and with her own life, they enjoy the uninvolved nature of the copy-paste they receive. By not interfering with her own needs, the woman realizes that this man flourishes. They say that if you want to be admired, you should die. Or go on a trip. That's what people call a French exit, a fancy name for pulling a ghosting. Everyone wonders what happens to you when you ghost. People call a ghoster the one who pulls the disappearing act, but in fact, we are the ones having to deal with the feeling of becoming invisible, ghostly, and to be honest, when that happens, we don't feel really admired. So when the second man goes on to detail the ghostly connections he shared with his exes, the woman thinks of her own past. An ex she had once said, "We should never speak again, and even if you contact me, I will never answer." 2 months later, she woke up to a happy birthday from him. The happy birthday was written exactly like that. There was no punctuation, no exclamation mark, no period, no intensity. Basically, dead talk. A dead happy birthday that sounds dead and tone deaf, like a beige sandwich with dead bread from a dusty shelf from a gas station in Indiana, sent in an envelope licked by the dead fiancé of George Constanza, who died after licking the expired glue off too many envelopes for wedding invitations to a wedding that was never planned more than a funeral in the first place. The dead almost always come back, the woman remarks. They like to make sure we don't forget them. So, amid this existential email ping-pong, the first man decides to further his inner philosopher. To be dead to someone is better, not worse, than to be forgotten, he says. What do you think? The second man, not one to be outdone, jumps in with the promise never to forget her, even if they become somewhat dead to each other. The woman contemplates this pledge of eternal, yet ominous, remembrance. What satisfaction does it bring to know someone won't forget you, even if they clear out their digital clutter, meaning they uninstall a dating app, close an email inbox, or even block you? It's like being told you're a timeless masterpiece, but only exhibited in a state prison. I hope I die living behind an unfinished work of art like Mozart did with Lacrimosa, she types. But there is a pause. She knows she can't unleash contempt like a fire-breathing dragon. You can't fight fire with fire. Submission is surefire. Ready to fire? Here's another mid-century modern masterpiece. I don't know what to say, she finally types, leaving them both in a state of existential confusion, as if they stumbled upon the lost Beckett play and discovered it was in fact written by Shakespeare's sister. You're so mysterious, the second man types. I can't quite figure you out. Ah, mystery. The meretricious lure of counterfactuals, the first man replies. A phrase she has to run through the Merriam-Webster dictionary just to make sure it's only academic and not Middle English, and therefore comprehensible to the second man who can't possibly know Middle English because he doesn't read. But if it were Middle English, so what? Another part of her revolts. I mean, Joan Didion said she spoke Middle English when asked at her job interview with Vogue in 1970 what languages she fluently spoke. Which part of us has us think we're too daring if we are sincere? And which part of us has decided to use seduction to survive? And mostly, which part has evolved to use seduction to defeat? All the women who used men names to write their novels wrote history. How many men used women's names to write history? How many women used to measure their orgasms against the count of Lady Chatterley's, only to learn that Lady Chatterley was in fact a man called D.H. Lawrence? The second man is enraptured by the meretricious lure of the counterfactuals. To appease the first man, he says, "I'll buy a book." By D.H. Lawrence, the first man persists. The second man obeys, even though he initially mistakes it for an acronym for DHL, or Delivery Bureau. And just like that, Narcissus is subjugated. Because apparently, deep down, we all crave a little subjugation. What would Freud say about that? "You're very 19th century," the second man says, getting analytical about planning their next date, which has to happen in a hotel, because his apartment is likely inhabited by the ghost of some ex-girlfriend. He places her not in the Michelberger Hotel, where she likes to stay, but at the Oderberger. That's a better fit for someone cute and 19th century, like you. Because apparently, existential banter pairs better with a change of scenery that someone else pays for. It's like being cast in a period drama, but instead of corsets and ballrooms, it's Berlin's hipster hotels. She doesn't get a room of her own because this man has decided she has all the perks of a wallflower, which was already established when he repeatedly called her cute, because cute is not something we can pull out with grown-ass women, rather with small animals, children, and outfits that pertain to sexualized infantilism or shows like Emily in Paris. So, she gets her fitting instructions from the second man, who thinks he's the Frank Lloyd Wright of relational architecture. He's got the blueprint for exactly where she fits, how she fits, and what fits her, because nothing says modern love like being situated in the landscape of architecture, right? Enter the first guy, the 19th century fox, who probably thinks he's penning love letters to some forlorn, wife-like 14-year-old maiden picking heather in the moors at Downton Abbey, in between reciting Thoreau and daydreaming about steam engines. He's all scholarly, all right, and bright, writing in a way that would make Lincoln tip his hat. So the woman, not one to be confined by architectural blueprints or cornfields or gas stations in Indiana, decides to be wherever these men have placed her. She could be a sponge or she could be a stone, but she chooses to be a balloon, rise at wuthering heights above the situation, and let them have their cake, and eat it too. She lets the stoic man diffuse all the melodrama of the nonsensical, Tinderistic affairs of his counterpart, the modern D.H. Lawrence. And she lets the self-involved fuckboy listen to the stoic, who preaches the teachings of Moby Dick, a book in which no woman has ever set foot, because it really only takes a man, or a couple of men, to stroke another man's ego with the only other most seductive thing that is not football or hunting. Politics. When the first man confidently claims that Trump was the only American president who didn't start a war, the second man caves in. He stops the banter about his romantic past, and, as if finally discovering the woman for the creature unlike any other that she is, he writes an aroused email straight from the depths of Berkheim, expressing his secret, burning desire to persuade her to join him in the AfD. Here's the hallmark of mating in captivity. The symbiosis eventually turns parasitic. The animals enmesh with each other, begin to lose their distinctive traits, and merge into a single, starved, slightly confused entity hungry to eat itself. And this is where the nature interferes, to self-destruct, to delete the anomaly, to ensure this could be only a cautionary tale and not once more the stuff of history books just before elections. The woman makes her French exit by the time the two men long to meet her, by which I mean they long to meet each other and perhaps continue the mental gymnastics on the sofa, because they possibly read in the journals of Sylvia Plath that every woman adores a fascist. So she assassinates her own character, booting her software like the bot in the movie Her, solving thus the issue of disappearing in her own terms, which solves the issue of being admired. After all, every hero becomes a ghost.